My husband and I had been married for 4 years when he told me he wanted to open his own restaurant. Not a small cafe. Not a food truck to test the waters. A full sit-down restaurant in the heart of downtown Atlanta, white tablecloths, a wine list, a head chef poached from a hotel kitchen, the kind of place that takes a name before it even has a menu. He laid out the business plan on our kitchen table one Sunday morning, and I remember the way he looked at me excited, certain, like he already knew I would say yes. And I did say yes. Because I loved him. Because I believed in him. And because I had spent 6 years before our marriage working 80-hour weeks as a software engineer, living below my means, and saving a sum of money that most people our age had never seen in a single bank account. "This is our future," my husband said that morning, reaching across the table and squeezing my hand. "Our kids are going to grow up knowing their dad built something real." I smiled. I believed him. What I did not know then, what I would only understand much later, when the pieces finally came together in a way I could not ignore, was that he had already decided, in some quiet and deliberate part of himself, that the restaurant was his, not ours, his. And that I was simply the mechanism by which it would be funded. I should tell you a little about who my husband was, so you understand what I was working with. He came from a family that had opinions about everything and accountability for nothing. His mother ran the household like a duchess administering a small territory, and his two sisters followed her example perfectly. They were the kind of women who never said anything cruel. Directly they said it sideways, with a smile, in a tone that made you question whether you had misheard. The first time I met his mother, she looked at my shoes and said, "Oh, how practical." I wore 4-inch heels to every family dinner after that, just on principle. My husband, for his part, had charm in abundance and follow-through in short supply. He was brilliant in a room, funny, magnetic, the kind of man who made every stranger feel like an old friend. But he had never finished what he started. The personal training certification he studied for and abandoned. The online retail business that lasted 3 months. The investment club he started with his college friends that dissolved when the first stock pick went wrong. I had told myself these were the experiments of a man still finding his direction. I had told myself that the restaurant was different because now he had me, and my support, and my belief. I transferred $430,000 into the joint account we had set up specifically for the business. I want you to sit with that number for a moment. $430,000. Years of my life, converted into a figure, deposited in a single afternoon. I also signed a lease agreement for the restaurant space, or rather, I was told I had signed it. I would come back to that detail later. For the first several months, I was involved. I reviewed vendor quotes. I weighed in on the interior design. I sat across from the general contractor and asked the questions my husband forgot to ask. He called me his secret weapon in those early months, and I thought that was sweet. I did not yet understand that a secret weapon is something you use and then put away. Around the 8th month, things shifted. My husband started taking calls in the other room. He started having meetings I wasn't invited to, with people he described vaguely as investors and partners. When I asked questions, he answered them, but the answers were always just slightly incomplete, like a story with a word missing in every sentence. I told myself he was stressed. I told myself this was what it looked like when someone was carrying a lot. His mother started coming around more. She had opinions about the restaurant's branding, the menu concept, the uniforms for the waitstaff. She sat at my kitchen table and spoke as though she were the silent partner in this venture. As though the $430,000 had materialized from the atmosphere and not from my savings account. One evening she looked at me across the table and said, with her particular sideways sweetness, "You know, the restaurant world is very social, very image-forward. It's important that the people representing the brand make the right impression." I said, "I completely agree." She smiled. "We're so glad you understand." I didn't realize until later that I had just been told, in the politest possible terms, that I was not the right impression. The grand opening was scheduled for a Friday evening in March. I know the date because I had been looking forward to it for nearly a year. I had a dress selected. I had arranged to have my hair done that afternoon. I had written a small toast in the Notes app on my phone, nothing formal. Just something warm I wanted to say to the people who had helped bring this thing to life. On the Wednesday before the opening, my husband came home and sat down across from me with the particular expression he wore when he was about to say something he had already decided I would accept. "So, about Friday," he said. "I'm ready," I said. "I was thinking we should arrive by 6, so we have time before guests." "The thing is," he said, "we're keeping it small. Just close family and a few of the investors. We don't want it to feel crowded for the first impression." I looked at him. "I'm your wife," I said. "Of course," he said. "But you know how these things are. My mom is coordinating the guest side of things, and she really wants the room to feel curated. You know how she is." I knew exactly how she was. "I funded this restaurant," I said. "I am the reason there is a restaurant to open." He reached over and touched my hand in the way he did when he wanted me to feel managed rather than heard. "I know that, babe. And everyone who matters knows that. This is just one evening. There will be plenty of events going forward where you'll be front and center. I promise." I pulled my hand back. I did not go to the grand opening of the restaurant I had paid for. I sat in our apartment that Friday evening, and I thought about a lot of things. I thought about the lease agreement I had supposedly signed and never received a copy of. I thought about a name I had seen on my husband's phone 6 weeks earlier, a contact labeled simply V, and the text preview I had glimpsed before the screen went dark, which read, "We need to talk about the timing." I had told myself at the time that it was a vendor. I had wanted very much to believe that. I thought about the $430,000. And then I stopped sitting, and I started moving. I called a friend of mine, a woman I had gone to college with, who now worked as a family law attorney in the city. I told her I needed to understand something. I told her I had transferred a very large sum of money into a joint account for a business that was now operating, and I had questions about how that was structured legally. She told me to come in the next morning and bring everything I had. I brought everything I had. What I learned over the following 2 weeks rearranged my understanding of the previous year entirely. The lease for the restaurant space had been signed, but not by me. My signature on the lease was not my signature. I had never seen that document. Someone had replicated my name on a legally binding agreement without my knowledge or consent. My attorney was very quiet for a long moment when I showed her the copy I had finally obtained. Then she said, carefully, "Do you understand what this means?" I told her I was beginning to. The investors my husband had been meeting with included a woman named Vanessa. Vanessa was not an investor in the traditional sense. Vanessa had been, for approximately 14 months, in a relationship with my husband that was not a business relationship. Vanessa was also, as of 6 weeks before the grand opening, expecting a child. I want to be honest with you about what that felt like, because I think sometimes these stories skip past the part where a person has to absorb information that breaks something in them. It did break something. I sat in my car in the parking garage below my attorney's office, and I cried in a way I had not cried since I was a child. The kind of crying that has no dignity to it, that just comes out of you whether you want it to or not. I gave myself 20 minutes. I timed it. Then I dried my face, and I went back upstairs, and I said, "Okay. Tell me what my options are." Here is what my attorney told me. Because the money had been transferred from my personal savings into a joint account that I co-owned, and because the business had been established using those funds, I had legal standing that my husband had not fully considered. The forged signature on the lease was not merely a civil matter, it was a crime. And there was something else. In the process of setting up the business, a significant asset had been put in my name specifically, a property that served as collateral for a vendor financing arrangement. My husband had done this, my attorney believed, because at the time, he thought having the asset in my name provided a certain kind of protection. He had not fully thought through what it meant that the asset was, legally, mine. We filed the paperwork quietly. I did not tell my husband what I was doing. I went home each evening and I made dinner, and I answered his questions about my day, and I waited. This was the hardest part. Not the grief, not the anger. but the patience. The deliberate stillness of a person who knows something the room doesn't know yet. 13 days after the grand opening, my husband called me at 2 in the afternoon. "I need you to transfer some money," he said. "The linen vendor and the POS system company both have overdue invoices. It's about 18,000. Can you move it from your account today?" I was at my desk at work. I looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline for a moment before I answered. "I'm sorry," I said. "Which account are you referring to?" "Your savings," he said. "Just the transfer we talked about." "We didn't talk about a transfer," I said. "Babe, my money," I said, "is for people I trust. You told me the grand opening was for close family only. So I'm sure you have people closer to this situation than I am who can help." There was a pause. "What are you talking about?" he said. "I think you should call your mother," I said. "She seems very invested in the brand." I hung up. He called back 4 times. I let it go to voicemail. That evening he came home and he was not the charming, magnetic version of himself. He was the other version, the one I had seen only a few times, when things hadn't gone his way and there was no audience to perform for. He wanted to argue. He wanted to explain. He wanted to walk me through a version of events in which he was reasonable and I was being difficult. I let him talk. When he finished, I said, "I know about Vanessa." The room changed. I said, "I also know about the lease." He started to speak. "I have an attorney," I said. "Everything else you want to say, please direct it to her." He left that night. He went to his mother's, I assumed. I changed the locks the following morning, and because the property that had been placed in my name included rights I had not previously understood, I also made a call to the vendor financing company to notify them of a change in the management structure. My attorney was extraordinarily thorough. The process took several months, and I will not pretend it was easy. There were days that were very hard. There were phone calls from his sisters that I did not return, and a letter from his mother that my attorney advised me not to respond to personally, so I didn't. But here is what the settlement looked like when it was done. The restaurant, the white tablecloth, wine list, head chef restaurant in downtown Atlanta that had been built with $430,000 of my savings, and a forged signature was restructured. Because of the legal complications around the lease and the forged document, and because of the asset that had been placed in my name, my position was considerably stronger than my husband had anticipated when he decided I lacked the right image for a grand opening. I received a full accounting. I received a settlement that reflected my actual contribution plus damages that my attorney negotiated without my husband fully understanding what he was conceding. The restaurant continued to operate under new management arrangements. My husband was not in a strong position to contest much of anything, given the criminal exposure created by the forged signature. His attorney, I was told, advised him to be cooperative. His mother called me one final time, 3 weeks before the settlement was finalized. She wanted to have a conversation. She wanted to explain that family was complicated and that she hoped we could find a way through this that preserved everyone's dignity. I told her I thought dignity was a wonderful thing. I told her I had spent a great deal of the previous year watching it be handled carelessly by people who should have known better. I told her I wished her well. Then I hung up and I poured myself a glass of the very good wine I had bought from a restaurant whose linen vendor had been promptly paid. "I want to tell you something, because I think it matters. I am not someone who wanted this outcome. I am not someone who went into my marriage planning an exit strategy or holding my love at arm's length to protect my assets. I loved my husband the way you love someone when you're 31, and you think you've found the person who makes the future feel solid. I transferred that money because I believed in something real. What I learned, what I am still learning, is that believing in someone is not the same as disappearing for them. That investing in a partnership means you are a partner, not a resource. That when someone tells you, in whatever indirect and smiling way they choose, that you are not quite the right fit for the thing you paid for, they are telling you something true about how they see you, and you are allowed to update your understanding accordingly. I am 33 now. I have my own apartment, a good one, with windows I chose myself. I have the settlement money in an account that has only my name on it. I have my attorney's number saved under A in my phone, which is where it will stay. I also have, somewhere in the Notes app on my phone, a toast I never got to give. I read it sometimes. It was a good toast. It deserved a better room. But I'm patient. I'll find one.